What's up, everybody? It is week 16. It is the Fantasy Football Semifinals. I am the at home dad. Find me on Twitter at FF the at home dad. You are watching, listening to the Fantasy Facts podcast presented by Fantasy Data. We're going to do the entire week 16 rapid rundown right here, the full slate. We got injuries from NFL.com. We got start sits from myself. You have fantasy projections from Fantasy Data, and you have betting lines from bettingdata.com. Make sure you go and check all those things out. If you head over to fantasydata.com, log in, sign up for a subscription, use the promo code FACTS, that's FAQS. You can get yourself some money off that subscription. That's where I pull all of these numbers from, get all my data from Fantasy Data. You should do the same because they're the best out there. All right, we are jumping straight in. It is Thursday. We have a Thursday night game. I was trying to get another little superlative in there. It doesn't really work. It's Jacksonville coming to the New York Jets. It's going to be cold. I live in New York, granted on the other side of Manhattan, but it's going to be cold out there. They're going to be out in the elements. Expect this to be a relatively low scoring game, at least according to the Vegas odds. All sorts of games this week are super low scoring according to Vegas. There's not a single 50-point game out there, and most of it is because of the weather. You definitely want to keep an eye on that. There was a really good article I read over at CBS where it looked at the past 20 years, I think it was, of weather data. And whenever the weather is freezing, whenever wind is up over 15 miles per hour, you see a decrease in passing, scoring, and then an increase in running the ball. So, what does that mean for our Jacksonville, New York game tonight? It means you can't really trust a whole lot of the players. First of all, you have Zach Wilson, who you couldn't trust throwing the ball in good weather. Now you have him in bad weather. I am not touching him. Garrett Wilson, I think, is still going to be the guy to get the most amount of work in this Jets passing game. However, it's going to be a little bit tricky to go ahead and start him. However, his upside is there. Zach Wilson targeted him 9 times last week. Granted, he was only able to bring in 4 of those passes, but it was for 98 yards. Bam Knight is going to look to be the main rusher tonight as well. The question is, what is that split going to look like between him and Michael Carter, which has been the question really this entire year with this Jets offense and this running back by committee approach. When they had Michael Carter, Brees Hall, they had Ty Johnson, they had Bam Knight now thrown into the mix. It's still the same question that you're going to have to ask yourself is, do I feel confident enough to be able to roll these guys out there? I think you can throw Bam Knight into your lineups. I expect him to be more of an RB3. Granted, you're not going to put him in a flex position because he's playing tonight. He should be in your main lineup. Other than that, I don't really have enough faith to start Michael Carter, even though this could become one of those games. If Bam Knight struggles a little bit, they get Carter in there. Carter is a fine rusher. I don't know where this narrative of him being just simply a pass catching back comes from, but he is a fine runner of the football as well. Other than that, you're not really firing up anybody here. Even Tyler Conklin, I wouldn't really throw out there as a tight end option. You have a full slate. There's all 32 teams playing. I think you can find a better tight end option out there than Tyler Conklin. Or CJ Uzoma, who's my boy. I've always loved CJ Uzoma, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that you're going to roll out there either, even though he had a big game last week. On the Jacksonville side of the ball, I do think you can start Trevor Lawrence. He is questionable with a toe injury, but I fully expect him to play. Christian Kirk, you're going to get in there. Travis Etienne, you're going to get in there as well. Even though this Jets defense is pretty solid, you should still expect Travis Etienne to get some work. Zay Jones had himself a phenomenal game. I think you can work him in as well. And Evan Ingram, he's one of those tight ends I do think you can work into your lineups. I think he's again one out of all 32 teams. I think he does give himself a low end tight end one type of capability. The Jets defense is not the Jets defense that it's been in the past, where people have just bulldozed them. This is a defense that is doing well, and it looks like Quinnen Williams will play tonight. He is questionable, but he was a limited participant. Last I looked, let me just take one more quick look to make sure I'm giving you the right. Oh no, he was a full participant, so he should be playing tonight if he was able to participate fully in practice on Wednesday. So that does up the Jets defense a little bit, but I think the Jags offense is still going to be able to find things. This could be another, again, I do feel this is going to be a low scoring game. You're probably not going to get to both teams at 20 again. And that over under a 37 actually sounds like that's how the game is going to finish at about 20-17, which has been, seems like the Jets' typical kind of output. The spread is only a point and a half. That could go either way. I could see either of these two teams kind of being on top at the end of the day, but I would expect it to be by a field goal. So whichever way you're feeling, I think you can take the spread. Moving right along, we have the Buffalo Chicago game. This is one of the games that is most impacted by the weather. It's supposed to be cold. It's supposed to be windy. It's supposed to be snowing at some point during the game. Definitely want to keep an eye on that. Now, Josh Allen has been able to play in the cold and do just fine. We saw a little bit of snow last week and he played fantastic. You're going to be playing Josh Allen. There's no reason that if you're in a playoff matchup, semifinals right now, that you're going to sit Josh Allen. There's just there's really no other better option than Josh Allen, especially this week. Yes, weather could play a factor, but again, I don't expect that to be the case. Again, with Stephon Diggs, might limit him a little bit, but again, he's projected at 18 points, one of the top wide receiver projections for the week. I would be rolling out Stephon Diggs. Yes, there's a little bit of hesitancy there because of the weather, but definitely go ahead and get him in there, get him going. On the running back side of the backfield, I do like Devin Singletary in this matchup. I think he's going to be the main rusher. James Cook could get a little bit of work, but I don't expect this to be a James Cook hand the ball off a lot type of situation. And because I don't expect Chicago to be able to be in a boat race with the Bills, I expect this game to be one where they're going to be grinding the clock a lot more. Not only is weather going to be in their favor, but also the fact that they should be able to be up on a really bad Chicago defense. And that offense, if it's not Fields rushing the ball for touchdowns, they don't really have much of an offense to speak of on the Bears side of the ball. We'll talk about their fantasy projections in just a second. But that really leans heavily to, in my opinion, to Devin Singletary being a perfectly fine start. I could see him, especially if he can find the end zone, exceeding the 11-point projection that he has right now. Gabe Davis has been the volatility winner of fantasy football this year. He's either put up monster games or just complete bust. In this type of game, I think I'm happier putting him on the bench, even though he could have that blow up game. Unless, again, this has been my motto for weeks now. It's almost always been my motto. If I'm projected to lose, if I need that kind of home run hit, I like taking my swings in Thursday night games, because then I know, man, Gabe Davis really pooped the bed. I need to get somebody else in there that's going to hit me some home runs. But I think this is a game where I feel fine kind of putting Gabe Davis on my bench and taking my swings in other places. Dawson Knox had himself a really nice game this past week. Again, I would be happy starting him over guys like, Conklin, or, there's going to be other guys that we get into, but I think Dawson Knox is an okay start here. If the weather really turns, though, he's definitely going into my bench. I don't think he's enough of a part of this passing offense that he has to be in your lineup. If the weather looks like it's going to hold off a little bit, perfectly fine with getting him in the lineup. I would actually be happier with Evan Ingram tonight than I would be with Buffalo. And actually, my apologies. Buffalo is actually a Saturday 1:00 game, not a tonight game. I don't know why I just got stuck in that Thursday mode. But Gabe Davis, I'm happy with him being more on my bench. Dawson Knox, I can be happy with him on my bench as well. And then, like I said, James Cook, yes, he has some upside. Yes, a lot of teams are probably desperate at running back. Maybe you work him in, maybe you don't. Perfectly fine with either of those. I think he's going to be more of a sit this week than he is a start. On the Chicago side of the ball, Justin Fields. Done. That's it. Moving on. All right, fine. We'll give it a little bit more. Justin Fields, projected for 18 points. It all comes down to whether or not he's able to get running room against this Bills defense, which has been dinged up quite a bit, has been for a few weeks. The hope is that they're getting healthy for playoffs. However, Justin Fields should have himself enough of a day where you are going to be getting him into your lineups. Yes, there's a little bit of hesitancy there, but this is definitely a start your studs type of situation. And if the weather does turn, we might see even more rushing opportunities for Justin Fields. David Montgomery coming in with a projection of 12.8. I think you're going to go ahead and get David Montgomery in there. It looks like Khalil Herbert might be getting some run this week. I don't like starting him fresh off of the injury. That is not a winning formula. At least it hasn't been recently, at least in my eyes. I'd love to see some of the actual data out there. I think at one point there was data that proved that starting running backs off of an injury is not a very good idea. But if you got better data, share it with me. I'd love to see it. All right, moving on. Chase Claypool, womp 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 womp. Cole Kmet, womp womp. Byron Pringle, Brian Byron Pringle. Wow, that name really got me. And Equanimous St. Brown. That one not though. Interesting. None of those guys are really worth starting. Cole Kmet, maybe you can work him into a lineup, but again, if the weather turns, he's the same as Dawson Knox. I'm perfectly fine putting him out of my lineup, especially if you see snow, wind gusts of up to 20 miles an hour, and it's going to be freezing up in Chicago for this game. So definitely a game that you can avoid without needing to feel bad about it. All right, we're gonna hit another set. We're gonna try and hit all these Saturday 1 o'clock games first. And we have up next Cincinnati traveling to New England. Again, expect weather to be an issue here. It doesn't sound like it's going to be quite as bad, but it's definitely going to be a freezing game. The big question is, you have your big three in New England. You have Mac Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, and Jacoby Myers. They're the highest projected. They are the biggest names that are there. They're also the three players that all kind of messed up on the final play of the game, that just everybody has been talking about, where the Raiders intercepted a really bad play, bad decision by Jacoby Myers to throw the ball back about 30 yards to Mac Jones, and then to really a Raiders linebacker intended for Mac Jones, and then Mac Jones just got put into the dirt. I don't believe all of the narrative around around how this is going to impact them. I do believe that Bill is very, very upset with all of them. But again, in that moment, it's not necessarily forgivable, but you understand what they're doing. Like you should be able to say like, okay, I kind of get what you're doing, but that was just a terrible, terrible, terrible idea. That being said, I definitely think you're going to roll out Ramondre Stevenson. Yes, he has a little bit of a questionable tag there, but go ahead and get him into your lineups. Mac Jones was probably not in lineups anyways. He's probably not in any type of lineup unless it's a super flex. Definitely not in single quarterback, and even in super flex, man, you're probably not in the semifinals if you have Mac Jones going for you. Jacoby Myers becomes like a wide receiver 4 if the weather gets bad, maybe wide receiver 5. A lot of times you're probably going to be stuck in a situation, especially if you're starting 3 wide receivers and have 2 flex. Like this become pretty much a typical lineup roster construction for a lot of leagues. You're probably rolling Jacoby Myers out there because your other options are just not going to be nearly as good. Outside of that, you're not starting anybody else. You're not starting Hunter Henry, Nelson Aguilar, Devontae Parker. You're not starting any of those guys. And if the weather's bad, it's probably a good thing you're not. We could see possibly a little bit more Damian Harris in this, but it seems like either Bill's not ready to really work him in. But if we're going to see any type of running back split, it's probably going to be this week. But it's hard to tell who that's going to be, especially with some of the guys, Pierre Strong, Kevin Harris, that kind of did nicely when Damian Harris was out over the past few weeks. But again, I think it's going to be the Ramondre show. But like I said, if you're going to get some committee play, it's going to be this week with the weather possibly being really bad in New England as well. On the Cincinnati side of the ball, you are going to be firing up Joe Burrow, Chase, T. Higgins looks like he's back and healthy. Enough people complaining about whether or not you can start him, but he does seem perfectly fine. And Joe Mixon, I think, is going to be a good start in this matchup as well. Again, if the weather gets bad, you're probably going to have to lean on the running game a little bit more, which means this could end up being a really nice game for Joe Mixon. But that doesn't mean that you're going to sit guys like Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. You're going to go ahead and get them into your lineup. Hayden Hurst looks like he's going to be back and healthy. It's going to be a question, though, of whether or not he's 100% healthy and whether or not they're going to be passing the ball enough. I think that they're going to be doing just fine with that. Joe Burrow is no stranger to cold weather games, so go ahead and keep him in your lineups, and he should do just fine. Other than that, there's not really much that you would play in this type of matchup with any type of confidence. And so with that, we're going to move on to the next one. We have the New York Giants. They are traveling to Minnesota. You're going to be firing up Saquon Barkley. He's the second highest. He's just under Daniel Jones in terms of projection. You're going to be firing him up in this matchup. You're going to be firing up really like maybe Darius Slayton as a flex option. Maybe Daniel Jones is a super flex option. Daniel Jones is that kind of quintessential, not very good, but good enough that he's a fine play for super flex. And other than that, you're probably not playing anybody else out there. You're not playing Richie James or Isaiah Hodgins. Daniel Bellinger is still kind of working through some injuries, but it looks like he's back on the field. You're not going to play any of those guys in this matchup. Yes, the Minnesota team, Minnesota's defense can be beat, but you're expecting them to be beaten by Saquon Barkley. On the Minnesota side of the ball, Justin Jefferson, you're going to be firing up. Kirk Cousins, I think you can fire up, and Dalvin Cook, you're going to be firing up. Adam Thielen's projected for 12 points. If you've been listening, you know my stance on Adam Thielen. Start at your own caution. TJ Hawkinson, I think, is a fine play for the tight end position for this week. This is going to be a really interesting matchup. It's actually one of the highest. It's the third highest over under of the week at 48. Expect points to be scored because even though both of these teams have had good defensive outputs, there's definitely ways that these teams can be beaten, and I think we can see that happen here. Minnesota's favored by 4 points. I don't know if I trust Minnesota to do that, especially after the scare that they had against the Colts. I kind of like the Giants to be able to cover that 4.5 point spread, and if you get lucky, maybe you can get a little bit more added onto that. But again, you're starting your studs in this one: Jefferson, Cook, Saquon Barkley. Those guys you're rolling out with absolutely no apprehension. And I think TJ Hawkinson gets a nice little game out of it. KJ Osborne had a nice little game last week. I think you can put him into a flex and hope that's one of those home run swings I was talking about before. I think you can put him in and kind of hope for one of those home run swings from a guy like KJ Osborne. Moving right along, we have Houston traveling to Tennessee. This is another game where weather is expected to be a factor. I expect this to be the Derrick Henry show. Man, oh man, there's not a rushing prop that I don't know I'm going to shy away from when it comes to Derrick Henry. This should be the Derrick Henry just come back to life, come back to fantasy stardom. I could see him being in the top 5 for running backs and maybe even top 5 on the week, because this should be a 200 point performance, and maybe two scores I think could be a realistic outcome for Derrick Henry. Now, obviously, I don't want to place too many bets on that, but because it's just not that likely to happen. But I think we're going to see a ton of Derrick Henry. I'm all for it. Derrick Henry projected at 19.65 fantasy points. I think he could definitely go over that. Malik Willis is looking like he's going to be the starter, which to me just dumps everything in terms of wide receivers for this. Treylon Burks, who's been a wide receiver 4 or 5 type of guy that you could roll out there falls almost completely off. Robert Woods has really been not much of a noise around him. The real question is around Okonkwo, who's come in and really been a nice little tight end play. I like him a lot. The only problem is again Malik Willis. If Malik Willis gets the start in this, I do not like anything in this Tennessee offense outside of Derrick Henry. And actually, I want to look right now just to see what the latest is. Yeah, and Tannehill did not practice on Wednesday. So keep an eye on that. Maybe Burks moves into a flex position if Tannehill plays. Maybe Okonkwo becomes a tight end star for you if Tannehill plays. If he's not going to play, though, that's an easy fade. All of the passing offense for Tennessee, and I don't know if I can get any higher on Tennessee's rushing attack. But, maybe a little bit, maybe a little more out of Derrick Henry. Maybe he goes for 35 attempts instead of just 30. On the Houston side of the ball, none of this really was that exciting in the first place. I don't think you can start Davis Mills even in a super flex. I'd rather take a stab. Hopefully, I have skill players that I can put in over him. I don't like that at all. You have to keep an eye on the injuries here. It looks like Brandon Cooks is healthy and will play. Even though Chris Moore right now is projected for more points, I think Brandon Cooks is the number one in this offense. The question is, does that mean anything fantasy wise? And I really don't think it does. I think you can start Chris Moore, Nico Collins if he's healthy, Brandon Cooks if he's it looks like he is going to be healthy. Even the running backs there, Ogunbowale, Burkhead, Royce Freeman, even like I think you can sit all of those guys, and I think you'll be perfectly fine with that. Even though Tennessee's rush defense is really good, their pass defense is last in the league in terms of yards per game. I'm not falling for that play. I just don't trust Houston to be able to move the ball with any type of confidence. Again, if I had to choose somebody, it'd probably be Brandon Cooks, but stay away, stay away, stay away. All right. Enough about what looks like probably the worst game of the week. And actually, it's not in terms of points, according to Vegas. It's at 35. There's one other team that is worse in terms of an over under than the 35.5 in that Houston Tennessee game. We'll get to that one in just a minute. Just a bit of a tease there. Instead, we are going to go first to Seattle and Kansas City. Yes, weather could play a factor in this one. It doesn't look like it's going to be nearly as impactful as some of the other games, but it does look like we're going to get some freezing temperature there. But that's not going to be enough to make you sit guys like Patrick Mahomes, Travis Kelce, even Juju has been doing just fine. Jerick McKinnon, I think, is the running back that you want to continue starting in this backfield, even though Pacheco is projected for 11 points. McKinnon's projected for 13. I think this is definitely keep riding the Jerick McKinnon wave as long as it's going to go for you. Yes, the other shoe could fall at any point, especially with this Chiefs backfield, considering the way that they've kind of rotated running backs just for forever, it seems like. But Jerick McKinnon definitely is. I have him in a handful of lineups. He's going to be playing in my semifinals, and I have no remorse, no holding back with Jerick McKinnon in this lineup. Hey, it's our buddy Joe. Joe, how's it going? Knocked out of playoffs. Sorry, had Sanders and went against Hurts. In one of the leagues I was in, I had Sanders and went up against Josh Allen and got knocked out. It's one of my leagues with my fraternity brothers, so I will never hear the end of it. But it is what it is. A nice little dynasty league, so I still feel really good about it. But yeah, that does hurt just a touch. And Cowboys had no pass rush pressure last week. Yes, I completely agree. It was a game that they should have been able to win. I don't agree with Shady McCoy. If you saw the sound clip of Dak is ass, I disagree. Dak is not ass. Yes, he has been making some mistakes. He's not ass. But I do agree he should have played better. That offense should have played better. We should have gotten a little more coaching. And I do feel we should have been able to get a little bit more of a pass rush on the Jags. I don't know, Joe, if you were able to listen to the beginning part of the game, not the game, but the beginning part of the show. Talked about Jacksonville and the Jets. I do like the Jets defense, but again, this Jacksonville team's rolling into form. I could see this being a really close game, even though it's the Jags and Jets. It's not a game that really gets a whole lot of headlines, but I feel like it could be very similar, minus the scoring that the Jets cannot get a lead. The Jets cannot get a 17-point lead the way the Cowboys did, but it could be a very similar type of game there for the Thursday night game. But anyways, back on track. Kansas City, Seattle. Actually, a really interesting game here. Definitely some playoff implications as both of these teams should be making it to the playoffs. Like I mentioned, though, Kansas City kind of already talked about them. The other wide receivers there, they're fun little sprinkles for DFS and stuff like that. They're not players you want to get into any managed league like MVS, Miko Hardman. Tony's back to healthy, but again, don't do that. Again, still ride with Juju. McKinnon has kind of become that guy. Yes, there could be some opportunities. The Chiefs know, and really, Andy Reid knows how to get some of these playmakers the ball, and I'm all for that. Let that happen, Andy. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be rolling out Kadarius Toney in any way, shape, or form, especially in a managed league. On the Seattle side of the ball, the Seattle offense should be able to take advantage of a Kansas City pass defense that is not very good. The only problem is they're going to be without Tyler Lockett, which does get Marquise Goodwin into a nice little situation. And hopefully, you were able to go out and grab him off of waivers. But I think he steps in with a fine volume type of role in this situation, and an offense that should be able to take advantage of a relatively weak defense in the Chiefs' pass defense. So go ahead and roll out Geno. Go ahead and roll out DK. This could end up being just DK just way up here and Marquise Goodwin way down here. It's a possibility. I think it's going to be a little bit more spread out, but I really like DK in this one. He's at 16 fantasy points projected. I could see him actually being slightly above that again, especially if he can get into the end zone. Kansas City should be able to move the ball. Kansas City should be able to put points on the board, which means that Seattle should be trying to match that rhythm, match that tempo, which could mean a whole lot of DK Metcalf and definitely enough work for Marquise Goodwin. It may mean a little bit of a downfall for Walker, but I think you're going to be rolling Walker out there. I don't think that this is going to be a game where they get so far out of hand that they don't keep Walker involved in the game. I think Seattle can keep the game close. And it's actually, this is the highest. Nope, sorry. It's the second highest by 1.5 over under at 49. I could see it being over that. I could see both of these teams being able to move the ball and get into the end zone, even though, like I said, the weather could be a bit of an impact on this game. I still like the over in it. All right, moving on. We're going to go to the Detroit Lions on the road against Carolina. Detroit, wow, what a fun team, and what a reversal of what they've been. Goodness, it seems like for decades now. A really fun team to kind of watch, see their progress happen. Will they make it to the playoffs? It's a fun narrative. It's a fun kind of look. I'm not sure that's going to happen, but it is definitely a fun look. Amon-Ra St. Brown, the highest projected on the team. You're rolling him out there. He's just been a focal point of this offense. Jared Goff is a fantastic super flex type of quarterback. I do not have the faith of putting him into a one quarterback league, especially with Carolina that's had some really good stretches of weeks of good defense. It's hard to say their defense is good when they're constantly playing from, just a bad position. Their offense just constantly putting them in bad positions, but it's a defense that has been able to do some really good things and stop some really solid offenses. So I'm not excited about putting Goff into many lineups. DeAndre Swift looks like he's really carving out. It's impossible to say a workhorse role, but it does look like he's looking like the lead back in this offense. But you can't count out Jamal Williams, and I think you're always going to have that hot hand approach with these two in the backfield. And Jamal Williams is almost a lock. It feels like every week to be a touchdown scorer because he is the goal line back. Yes, Swift took on a little bit more of that role as of late. But again, I think you can roll out both of them and kind of hope for that Jamal Williams anytime touchdown. Hope for DeAndre Swift to be able to collect enough volume and be able to find his way into the end zone against Carolina as well. On the Carolina side of the ball, like I mentioned, the offense is not very good. But they have been able to do a little bit more. Sam Darnold, is better than their other options, which says a lot about their other options. DJ Moore has been essentially he's been the bust of the season in the wide receiver position. Granted, you didn't take him nearly as high as some other guys, but he has just been such a complete bust this season. It's just been been nothing like his previous years where you could kind of count on like volume's going to keep him alive. It hasn't been there. He's projected for 12 points. I don't know how you roll him out with any confidence, even though, like I said, Sam Darnold has been at least a little bit more competent of a quarterback in this Carolina offense. It's just almost impossible to start him. You have the split backfield of Foreman and Hubbard. Um, Again, you can roll them into a flex position, but again, it's not anything that you should really feel confident or excited about. And yes, that's against the Detroit defense that can give up points. I'm going to start Hubbard in a league that I have him because I'm desperate and I'm hoping that they are able to take advantage of the Lions defense. But again, confidence level, it's down there somewhere, down on the floor somewhere. And then other than that, you can't really play anybody else on this Carolina offense. All right, enough about that game, which they're actually expecting a pretty good number of points out of that game with 44. From that game, which 44 is one of the high over unders of the week, to the lowest over under of the week, coming in at 32 and a half. And that is the New Orleans Saints traveling to Cleveland. Um, it's been very difficult to start Deshaun Watson. I think you can again probably work him in a super flex in a single quarterback league. I don't want to do it, especially with the over under projected at only 32 and a half. Same thing on the other side of the ball, Andy Dalton. I don't want to do it if I don't have to. Obviously, that's like a desperation type of play. Nick Chubb is dealing with an injury. Keep an eye on that. If Nick Chubb can't go, fire up all the hunt that you can get your hands on. Amari Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, David Njoku, those are guys that you're going to be able to flex them. Njoku is a guy that you've been able to start at times in the tight end position. He's a worthwhile start in this. He's not somebody that, you're not starting him over like Dallas Goedert, who looks like he's coming back from IR. You're not going to start him over that, even with Goddard coming back from IR. And Njoku has a nice little setup. Yes, I'd start him over guys like Dawson Knox, Gabe Davis, Tyler Conklin, stuff like that. But again, I don't think that anybody's really too strapped about that type of situation. Actually, Dawson Knox is projected for 9.2. I really don't think he's going to hit that, especially if the weather turns. And even if the weather's nice, I still feel better about Njoku rolling him out versus a guy like Dawson Knox. And like I said, Cooper, Donovan Peoples-Jones, not excited about them. But again, they're kind of that, especially DPJ has been a really solid guy that you've been able to work into your flex for a number of weeks now. So I think you can do that again. On the New Orleans side of the ball, I am still waiting for Alvin Kamara's blow up week. Could it come this week against Cleveland? Man, I hope so. But it's one of those things. Still kind of waiting for that to happen. I wanted it to happen last week. He had a good enough fantasy output. I think he finished somewhere around 15 to 20 fantasy points. But again, you keep like you. Come on, Kamara. And part of it is because Andy Dalton's just not moving the ball nearly enough for Kamara to get enough soft boxes, for Kamara to get enough balls out in space for the defense to have to respect it. That being said, Chris Olave is still a start for me. He is the number one option on this in this receiving game. I really love what Chris Olave brings to the table. He's one of my favorite dynasty guys right now. The only issue is Andy Dalton and this quarterback room and what is happening with the future of quarterbacks there. Juwan Johnson had himself a phenomenal week last week. I do not expect that to continue. He's not somebody that, again, I don't think you're working him that furiously into lineups. That being said, I do have a league where I'm probably going to be rolling out Juwan Johnson in my semifinals. I'm not happy about it, but I'm hoping we can get at least half of what his production was last week. Other than that, you're not rolling out Taysom Hill, you're not rolling out Landry, you're not rolling out Rashid Shaheed, even though he's electric and it seems like he gets the ball once and gets a touchdown. You're not going to roll him out in any managed league, and even in a DFS, you probably have a little bit better plays to make with guys that should be getting the ball just a touch more. All right. From the worst to pretty bad, also in terms of over under, is the Atlanta Baltimore game. Baltimore has been decent with stopping the run. And Atlanta has, again, another running back by committee offense going. Tyler Algier had himself a phenomenal week last week, and phenomenal is probably a bit of a stretch, but a really good week for him. But a really bad week for all those people like me that were like, all right, Cordarrelle, I need you, bro. Yeah, it's you're gonna get, I feel like, a lot more of the same of that happening. Especially because this game should be a relatively low scoring game. I expect them to hand the ball off more to Tyler Algier than they do to Cordarrelle Patterson. One of Patterson's best attributes was the fact that he could be lined up in a lot of different places. He could be used in a lot of different ways. He could get the screen game and be a lot more dynamic than a lot of other running backs, even at the age of 30. The big issue is Desmond Ritter. He came in, he didn't look very good. They didn't give him a ton of opportunities. And in this game, I don't expect him to get a ton of opportunities again. He's a guy that, if you've been waiting for him in super flex leagues, again, I'm one of them, he's a guy that you can keep waiting on. Don't get him into your lineups now. And that's even with a Baltimore defense that, can be very fluctuating in terms of how they stop opposing teams. Which that's going to hurt Drake London, who kind of started coming on a little bit, is not going to be there. And really anybody else in this offense isn't worth looking at. I think you can get Tyler Algier worked into some lineups as a flex play. He could be a nice little DFS play, again, because I think this is going to be a low scoring game. I think it's a game that if Atlanta can get out to a lead, again, which is possible, depends on what Baltimore defense shows up. It could be a game where they keep trying to hand it to Algier and they keep trying to pound the rock. Baltimore, you have Lamar Jackson projected at 16. It'll be interesting to see how he comes back from injury, especially in a game where Atlanta, even if Atlanta gets out to an early lead, it's going to be like lead of like maybe 3 points, 7 points. If they're like, woo, it's a barn burner. I don't expect this to be a game where Lamar needs to push the ball. It could be a game where he runs a little bit, but again, it's not a game where I'm excited for Lamar Jackson. I think he could finish underneath that 16-point projection. Mark Andrews is probably going to be very happy to have Lamar Jackson back. I think fantasy owners of Mark Andrews are going to be very happy with that as well. J.K. Dobbins looks like he's back and healthy, even though videos are really like, why does he look like he's running like that? I'm no doctor. I don't know what that means. Maybe he's just running a little funny. But it does look like he's back. It looks like he's going to be the main guy moving forward for this offense. I think you can get him into your lineups and feel pretty good about it. I don't see him having a 20, 25 point game, but a 10, 10, 15 point game, really in the flex. I expect him to do just fine. And then outside of that, I don't see anybody else worth really talking about on this offense. There's, Demarcus Robinson, Gus Edwards, Deshaun Jackson, all those other guys really not moving the needle, not getting into any managed leagues. Uh, with that, we're going to go to my favorite game of the week. It's going to be really interesting. And yes, you probably see my Cowboys banner hanging up behind me. It is the Dallas Cowboys at home against Philly. No weather going to be an impact in this game. I feel like that's probably why it is one of the highest over-unders at 47. The Cowboys are favored by 5 points, which as a Cowboys fan makes me very nervous. I this is a logic versus heart type of argument. Logically, I really like Philly getting +5 against the Cowboys here. That Philly defense is still the Philly defense. Gardner Minshew is still a capable backup. In my heart of hearts, though, I expect and hope the Cowboys to win this game. But I see that 5 point spread being a bit much for the Cowboys. Chris, as a Cowboys fan, you're worried about Minshew balling. I don't know if it's worried about Minshew balling as much as it is thinking that Minshew's going to be able to facilitate the game enough and get the ball to guys like AJ Brown, Devonta Smith, Dallas Goddard, even working in Miles Sanders. This could be a really good Miles Sanders game. Um, I don't know. You need reassurance. I don't know if you're going to get a whole lot of reassurance. But I think it's more so, can the offense of Philly, can the offensive coordinator, and I don't know who it is off the top of my head, but can Nick Sirianni and the offensive coordinator come up with enough plays to be able to go, hey, AJ Brown, you're really tough to tackle. Let's get you in motion. Let's get you the ball within 5 yards, because Minshew can hit that type of pass with all sorts of confidence. And it's a quick play. It's not one where he has to really diagnose too much with the defense. And we let AJ Brown just go ham. Can we get a play where we let Devonta Smith do some of that great route running, create separation, and give you a wide open look against the Cowboys zone defense that they'll definitely mix in this game? I don't know if there's a ton of reassurance I can give you in terms of Minshew having himself a day, but I do think it's a day where you can start AJ Brown. Obviously, not to the 30-point game that you can expect from him when he has Hurts slinging him the ball, but I think you can start him. Does he move to a wide receiver too? Probably. Does he move all the way out of your roster? I would not advise that at all. Devonta Smith, again, does he go from a 2 to a 3, maybe 4 in that range? Yeah, I think he does. But again, I think you can work him in. And actually, I think this helps Miles Sanders a little bit. The Cowboys, their run defense, especially when Leighton Vander Esch went out last week, really suffered. He is the tackling machine at middle linebacker. If he's not able to go, this could be a nice game for Miles Sanders and a really nice bounce back. Joe, Sanders hurt me also. But I think Sanders could get a nice little bounce back here. So if you survived Sanders' doo-doo of a game, I think it was like 3 PPR points last week, I think you can get him into 15, 20, especially, again, if Vander Esch is not able to go this week. And then Dallas Goedert looks like he's going to be able to go. Tight end position, fire him up. Yes, there's a little bit of hesitancy with people coming back from injury. I don't mind that nearly as much with Dallas Goedert, because I feel like his upside is definitely there. And again, Minshew should be able to hit Goddard, especially those types of throws. There's usually they're a little bit easier in terms of a design for your tight end to get open, and Minshew should be able to make those throws. And let's not forget, Minshew has had some really good games, especially in fantasy. So I don't want to give too much reassurance to you, Chris. In a one quarterback league, it might be tough to start him, but I think you can, especially in super flex, I think you can roll him out without feeling too bad about that play. And yeah, exactly. Yep. Minshew and Goddard last time out. I'd have to go back and double check. But Minshew in the past has definitely had at least good enough fantasy games where I think you can roll him out there and not feel completely like, oh crap, it's a wrap. Like I think you can put him in there. Yes, expect him to, struggle at times, but I think he could be it could be a game where we can get, he's projected for 14 points. I think you can expect him in that 15 to 20 range. I think that's a likely outcome for him. In one QB league, got Lawrence. Weather looks bad in New York. Yeah, like I said, it doesn't look too bad. Yeah, I might roll out. I might roll out Lawrence tonight. Keep an eye on the weather. The wind is what's really going to be the issue. I feel like I might roll out Lawrence just because that that one sets you up for the weekend of like, oh crap, Lawrence shit the bed. I need to get these other guys going. I might take a little bit more of a gamble on this guy versus this guy on my Saturday and Sunday games. But Lawrence has just been on that much more of an upswing, whereas I would rather trust the hot hand of Lawrence and go, all right, Lawrence, you should be you're the face of this franchise. I need you to do something for the face of my fantasy team. I'm going to roll you out in this, ride that hot hand versus trying to get Minshew in on that, maybe he's good enough to go in there. I lean towards Lawrence, but I do agree the weather is going to be that question mark. So keep an eye on what those wind gusts get up to, because the Meadowlands has a number of things that suck about it. Traffic being number one. Number two, the way the wind goes through the Meadowlands, it's basically built in a swamp in New Jersey. So if you've ever been there, I've been there a handful of times. If you ever been there, it's in a swamp in the middle in New Jersey. The way the wind goes through there, it can get really bad. So that's the thing I'd be most concerned about. All right. To finish up the Philly Dallas game, Dak, I need you to play better, Dak. We've already talked about it. I need you to play better. I need you to play smarter. That last interception, not on Dak. He hit Noah Brown directly in the hands. Yes, he could have forced the ball to somebody else, but your number 3 wide receiver, who had been having a good game, Noah Brown, should have caught that ball. But it never should have been a situation where that game went to overtime when the Cowboys put them up at 17 points. It never should have been a overtime game in the first place, and some of that falls on Dak. So Dak projected for 17 points. This Philly defense is stout. I'm still rolling Dak out in one quarterback leagues in games where I lost in leagues where I've lost hurt, but I have Dak. I'm putting him in there because I'm not. No offense, Chris. I'm not going through the argument of do I play Gardner Minshew or not. And yes, make sure you track that weather. And my pleasure giving that input, sir. Or man, Chris, I guess could go either way. Thanks, Chris. But Dak rolling him out there. Yes, the Philly defense gives me a little bit of apprehension, but I'm definitely going to be playing him. CeeDee Lamb is the number 1 wide receiver in this offense. You're going to be rolling him out there. And then Tony Pollard and Zeke. Yes, I said I'm going to keep saying it. Philly defense. It's tough. It's stringent. I don't expect this game to be as high scoring as 47 points. I could definitely see this game being a little bit more of a defensive battle. But I still think you're going to be rolling Pollard out there, mostly because you probably don't have a better option and his upside. And then Zeke has the upside of getting into the end zone. He brings that every single week. And if this game becomes a game where it's more of a slog, it's that tough nose, run the ball. I think you get a little bit more Zeke than you get Pollard. But again, that's gonna be a pretty even split. That seems to be what the Cowboys are doing more and more moving forward. Dalton Schultz is a tight end that I'm playing all over the place. It could be one of those things. They get all the Philly focuses on shutting down CD. They focus on shutting down the run. It opens up things over the middle of the field for Schultz to be able to take advantage. And he still has a really good connection with Dak. So I expect Schultz. He should have a fine enough game for the tight end position. He's projected for 10, which is a really good game for a tight end. He's projected for 10. I could see him in that 10 to 15 mark. The big hope is, again, with all tight ends, is that he falls into the end zone. And then outside of that, I don't expect Noah Brown to have another good game. Michael Gallup, I don't really expect much out of him, even though he's projected for 9.63 points. T.Y. Hilton joins the team, but again, don't expect much. All right, moving on. That was enough about Philly and Dallas. Moving on, we have Washington and San Fran. Both of these games are the 4 o'clock. Dallas and Washington, San Fran are the 4 o'clock games on Saturday. Going to be a fun little showdown here. I think San Fran covers the 7-point spread that we have right now. It's projected at only 38 points. Christian McCaffrey projected for 21 points. Yes, fire that up. Christian McCaffrey could end up on that top podium, not only just of running backs but of fantasy plays this week. Brock Purdy shown life, looks pretty good. Dealt with a little bit of an injury, but it looks like he's going to be good to go. George Kittle had himself a day. It'll be tough to expect that moving forward, but again, try and ride that wave, keep that going for him. Brandon Ayuk had a little bit of a down game, but that's all right. I think you're still going to roll him out there, especially if you have him. On the Washington side, and there's not really much else there in terms of that offense. That offense is CMC, 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 CMC. And then Kittle. Kittle's been really good, at least as of late. On the Washington side of the ball, this is a tough situation because Washington's offense has been moving a little bit, but the San Fran defense is if not the stoutest, it's one of the stoutest defenses in the league. They have been absolutely shutting down the run. I do not trust Brian Robinson. I don't trust Antonio Gibson. Again, if I had to choose one of them, I choose Antonio Gibson because I think he gets worked into the game a little bit more. At least he should, which again has been the argument for a long time. I don't like Tyler Heineke in this matchup. I think the only guy I'm really starting in lineups and being like, all right, you're in there, is Terry McLaurin. I'm going to put him in and expect him to be a wide receiver 3 in this matchup. The only other play that I'm interested in here is Jahan Dotson, and that's because it seems like every time he's healthy and on the field, he scores a touchdown, which makes him one of those kind of like home run plays of like, if San Fran is spending so much attention shutting down the run, shutting down Terry McLaurin, does that open things up for Dotson? And Dotson has shown that when he gets worked into the offense, he can score points. So that's really the only play that I'm intrigued by. And may make some moves in terms of second, third flexes, all dependent on roster construction, and maybe why not throw a little DFS in there, sprinkle them in, especially if you're out of the playoffs. Speaking of being out of the playoffs, if you have not already, make sure you go ahead and get signed up with Underdog. Use the promo code FACTS. We'll match your deposit up to $100 on your first one. Go ahead, check out Underdog. They have all sorts of fun games for you to get into. They have Pick'em, they have Daily, they have all sorts of different slates, and they have it for all different sports. So if you're like, nope, that's it, my fantasy season's done, you don't have to be done on Underdog because they have basketball, which is a good time. It's slightly out of my realm of expertise, but a good time also. Make sure you go ahead and check out Underdog. And again, use the promo code FACTS. That's FAQS when you sign up. All right, moving right along. Now we're moving into the late game on Saturday. We have the Las Vegas Raiders. Surprise comeback Las Vegas Raiders taking on Pittsburgh. This is, again, another game that's probably going to be impacted pretty heavily by the weather. The over-under is at 38.5 points. this could be a game that definitely hits the under. The spread is only 2.5 points. This is kind of looking like one of those sloppy back and forth games, finishing in the teens with both teams. And this is a Josh Jacobs game. Josh Jacobs has been the guy for like this whole stretch of games for the Raiders. And if the weather is a factor in this game, it should be pound, 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 pound the ball with Josh Jacobs all day long, even against a Pittsburgh team that can be pretty good against the run, especially if they have, if they have Watt and everybody else healthy on that defensive front. Um, Devontae Adams is projected at 18 points. It'll be interesting to see where he gets worked into this. He's proven that he is a very versatile wide receiver, but Derek Carr has also proven that he's not very good in the cold. So it becomes one of these back and forths of, do we trust the wide receiver that we know can make plays over the quarterback that we know struggles, especially when the weather gets bad on him? If you have Devontae Adams, you can't sit him, but his 18-point projection, I think we could be seeing under that, especially if this game holds true at being under, what did I say? It was under 38.5 points. I think Adams could be under that. I think Jacobs becomes the clear fantasy point scorer in this game. And again, Derek Carr in a super flex, roll him out, fine. In a one quarterback league, he's not on your radar in terms of starting him. Darren Waller looks like he's coming back. And again, very similar to Goddard. I have more faith in Goddard than I do in Waller coming back at this point. Waller has just been such a roller coaster ride this entire season. But if it's down to Waller, or I'm going to keep picking on Dawson Knox because why not? Waller or Knox, I'm going to play Waller. If it comes down to Waller or Conklin, Okonkwo, Hayden Hurst, all these guys that have been nice little fantasy plays, I'm probably going to throw Waller out there because we know what Waller can do when he gets the opportunity. Now, the flip side of that is because it's a Saturday night game. If my opponent's pretty much already done, and I know kind of what the shakeup of this is going to, of what the matchup is going to look like, I'm going to be more inclined to move Waller out if I need, like, hey, I only need like a 5-point game for my tight end. I might move Waller out just out of fear that he just throws up a complete goose egg and he's not completely ready to come back from this, from his injuries. And then I might play a guy, like Okonkwo was so tough, especially Malik Willis is there. But I might play a guy like Conklin. Never mind. Well, you can't play Conklin because he's not there anyways. But like a guy like Higbee, hell, even a Kade Otten, a Mo Alley Cox. I'm trying to look at the guys that have later games. Gerald Everett definitely over a guy like Waller. Mac Hollins has been a fun little experiment this season. Go ahead and start him up. Especially if Hunter Renfrow is out. It looks like he's going to be able to come back this week, but keep an eye on that. Again, I don't want to actually say fire up Hollins, but I think Hollins becomes a fun little play, especially in DFS, but possibly a fun little play if this game, if you're like, man, this guy, nobody knows what they're talking about. This weather's going to be all right. If that's the case, and Derek Carr is able to overcome his historical struggles in the weather, Hollins becomes a nice little play if that's what you believe. On the Pittsburgh side of the ball, you're not playing Kenny Pickett. I don't believe. Yes, he gets a nice little floor. He rushes for like 20, 30, 40 yards a game, it seems like. But this could definitely become the Najee Harris show, which would be great for Najee Harris owners because they've been patiently waiting almost all season for Najee Harris to finally have that blow up game that just has not happened this year. Deontay Johnson becomes, if he hasn't been tough to start, he becomes even tougher to start again with the weather. I can't not say it. The small hands, the little baby hands narrative of Kenny Pickett. Can he hold the ball in the cold weather? I don't want to. I try not to believe in narratives. I try and believe in more of try and provide context, but also believe more in the actual like numbers of it. I don't know if Kenny Pickett is going to struggle in the cold. There's not enough information that we have yet to kind of really say that, at least not that I know of. But it's going to be really tough to trust Deontay Johnson. It's been tough to start him the entire season. And George Pickens, I think you roll him out there because of the upside that he has. But again, it's a tough start, especially considering what the weather could be in this Pittsburgh game. And then Pat Fryermuth, eh, he's a guy that if it comes down to it, and I have both Waller and Fryermuth, and it's like, hey, I only need a couple points. I'm probably going to roll out Fryermuth and expect him to get them couple of points. More so than expecting Waller. But again, Waller becomes that guy that's like, all right, I need a 15-point game for my tight end. I need a 20-point game for my tight end. Waller becomes that guy that I just don't think Fryermuth can be that. All right. Moving right along. Now we're going into the Sunday game. So Sunday at 1 o'clock, a nice little thing. I was gonna say Thanksgiving, man. Nice little Christmas day if you're celebrating. I hope you celebrate it with a little bit of football. At least we get a good game in the 1 o'clock game for Christmas. It's a nice little present. You have Green Bay, who looks like they're starting to find a little bit more of a rhythm because yikes, they looked awful in the beginning of the year. And Miami, who is a playoff contending team, even though they just lost to Buffalo in the cold, it'll be interesting to see what we get going on here. What's nice is you won't have to worry about the cold because they're playing in Miami. You're probably going to get, a nice balmy 60, 70-degree game. Maybe a little bit more. I don't know. I'm not a weatherman. A nice little game in Miami, which means fire up Tyreek, fire up Tua, fire up Waddle. Raheem Mostert looks like he's the number one guy in that backfield. I think you can play him against this Green Bay defense that has just been all over the place. I think you can fire up all of these offensive weapons for Miami and feel pretty good about it. The big question is going to be on the other side of the ball with Green Bay. Aaron Rodgers is projected at a 15-point game, and then right under him is Aaron Jones at 15 points. I think you can roll out both of those guys. The real question is, what's that split with Aaron Jones and AJ Dillon going to be? We're finally getting more of what people thought it was going to be in the fall, or really in the summertime, because it was like August when people were saying AJ Dillon's going to take over this backfield, and then AJ Jones, just we're gonna merge all the names together. Aaron Jones really solidified himself as the number one dude, and AJ Dillon kind of fell off a little bit. Now we're seeing a little bit more of a blending of that. It'll be tough to rely on AJ Dillon in this game because I think they're going to have I think Green Bay is going to have to try and keep up with Miami, which means Aaron Rodgers, fire him up. AJ Jones, I was going to do it again. Aaron Jones, fire him up. Christian Watson, fire him up. Alan Lazard, maybe you could flex him. I think you'll do just fine there. But AJ Dillon, I think, becomes a little bit more of a risk because this game could shift completely away from his style of football. Yes, they did get him involved in the passing game a little bit more this past week, but that is Aaron Jones's territory. That's his wheelhouse. That's when Aaron Jones is at his best, is when he's catching little swing passes. He's doing a little Texas route. He's doing things to make linebackers' lives miserable. That's when Aaron Jones is at his best. And I expect him to have a nice, really nice game. I could see him being in that 20-point type of output. He's projected at 15 right now. I could see him being a bit over that. And this game is the number one game in terms of over-under at 49.5. If Green Bay's offensive woes get solved a little bit, Rodgers kind of poo-pooed on Christian Watson at the end of the game, saying if you run the right route, you'd catch touchdowns. Yeah, it looks like they're still doing a little struggle there. If their offense clicks a little bit more, they've been making progress each week. If they click a little bit more, I could see this game being in that over. Miami's firepower almost has enough to cover that as well. And I expect Miami to cover this 4-point spread. All right. So we go from a nice little present on Christmas with Green Bay and Miami to just a complete lump of coal in our stocking with Denver and the Rams. So we are getting Baker Mayfield on the Rams, Russell Wilson on the Broncos, in what essentially, like, I hope you have other plans. This is like when you set up Christmas dinner and kind of like overlook the football game that's going on here. Hopefully you don't have too many fantasy guys here because this is just going to be a nightmare. Russell Wilson and Baker Mayfield, I don't want to play either of them. I don't want to play either of them even in a super flex league. Running backs, Latavius Murray becomes flexible. Yes, they've been able to get him the ball a little bit. He becomes flexible, but no, I don't want to do that. Cam Akers, same thing. He's been able to put in a little bit of work. He looks a little bit better, especially a lot better than he looked earlier in the season. But again, he's projected for 9 points. And honestly, he could finish with 5. He could finish with 15, and you wouldn't know the difference. That's kind of how this Rams offense has been. Tuto Atwell, Van Jefferson, Tyler Higbee becomes one of the higher projected passing weapons here. Higbee, yes. Tutu and Van Jefferson, maybe in a desperate situation, you roll one of those two guys out there. But again, I think I'm much happier just not having them honestly on my team unless it's a dynasty league. And then on the other side of the ball, Jerry Judy, Cortland Sutton hopefully is back and healthy. Hopefully he can do a little bit more than he's done a few times this year. Judy, you're hoping for that like 30-point explosive game that he had in the past. Probably not going to happen. He's projected at 13. And again, sort of like Cam Akers, he could finish with 10 or 20 points and you really wouldn't know like the difference. It all depends on whether or not he finds his way into the end zone there. And then Greg Dulcich becomes an interesting play and one that I don't know. Do you play him? No, I don't want to. Can you? Yeah, I guess you could. Like it's just a very bleh type of play. This whole game is a very meh game, and like I said, I'm going to be trying to work with my wife to set the Christmas dinner plans to start at like 4:30, 5 o'clock, so that I don't miss much actual high level NFL football. All right, and then to finish out, oh no, not to finish out the Sunday games, we might have a good game here, and we might have another snore fest, which is good. That I'll probably be doing a pretty good amount of drinking, so I don't know. I might not remember too much of this game. This is a game that I'll probably go back and watch, after the fact. But we have Tampa Bay taking on Arizona. Arizona looks like they're going to be rolling out Trace McSorley. Gross. Which actually kind of damages James Conner doubly. Trace McSorley was the quarterback when Miles Sanders was coming out in Penn. And one of the things I noticed about Sanders was like he catches the ball just fine, but he doesn't have very many receptions because when he's open underneath, Trace McSorley would rather run with the ball than do the check down. So we could see more of that happen. Yes, that's been 3 years now. So there could be some development. He could check the ball down better at this point in his career, but I feel like that's a mindset that rushing, scrambling quarterback mindset that is much more difficult to change than just saying like, hey, you should check the ball down a little bit more. Try it out. So James Connery right now he's at 14. Should get plenty of volume to be able to hit that projection, but is he going to have the type of game to go way over that? I don't think so because I don't think he's going to be as involved in the passing game as you would need him to be. DeAndre Hopkins, this could just be one of those like 15 target games for DeAndre Hopkins. They're probably not going to be very good targets. At least, again, last time I saw Trace McSorley, Sorley was when I was watching Miles Sanders film to get ready for him coming into the NFL. So yes, maybe he's progressed some, but again, this looks like one of those situations where it could just be him throwing some really bad passes, but a lot of them to Hopkins. We should also see Marquise Brown get a decent amount of work, but again, the efficiency of it, the quality of those throws is probably not going to be very good. Tampa Bay has been highly dysfunctional as of late. But again, you're probably, at least in a super flex, you're probably rolling out Tom Brady. You've had to take him relatively high in order to have him. So you're probably rolling him out there. He's projected at 17 points. Arizona doesn't have a very good defense, but Tampa Bay going on the road and not looking their best, not looking their sharpest. A lot of that, I think, comes to like losing guys like Tristan Wirfs on the offensive line. But Brady projected at 17. I could see him right in that range, that 15 to 20 point range. I could see that. I don't see him being, you know, putting out a phenomenal game, but I could see him being okay. Chris Godwin projected at 15 points. I want that to happen for all my Chris Godwin shares, but I don't see him doing much more than that, but also not much worse than that. His involvement in the team is solid enough. He shouldn't throw up any real doo doo games where he's between 0 and 5 points. Mike Evans, same thing. He's projected for 13. Does Mike Evans finish with 15 and Godwin with 10? Absolutely, it could happen. It's very likely, not very likely, but very possible that we don't know which one of those two is going to be the main guy because that's kind of what they've done a number of times to us. And same thing with the running backs. You have White and Fournette. This could become a Fournette game if Arizona struggles so immensely with Trace McSorley under center. Fournette just gets the rock. He gets 25 rushing attempts because they're just pounding the ball. They need 4 yards a carry. They don't need any more. They're not going to get much less than that, especially with pushing back this Arizona defensive line. They should be able to do that, which means Rachaad White might not get as many touches. But again, this is a game I see as Tampa Bay having somewhere around 30 rushing attempts pretty comfortably. I think could be the case here, and that's because I just don't trust Arizona's offense to be able to keep things going. Now the question is, does Tampa Bay build enough of a lead in order to just keep handing the ball off with how dysfunctional they've been? That's the bigger question. All right, moving right along. It is now the Monday night game. It is the last game of the slate. I got to come up with a better name than Rapid Rundown because we're at an hour and 10, but we're going to do it. It is Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Indianapolis Colts. It's a 4.5 point spread towards the Chargers and over under a 46.5. Whether or not going to be a factor in this game. Michael Pittman should do just fine, and that is even with Nick Foles coming in and being the quarterback. It looks like starting this game. You're hoping for Saint Nick once again. How do you not start Nick, who had the nickname Saint Nick ahead of time, right around Christmas time? I mean, hell, why not fall for the narrative, the Monday night miracle of Saint Nick? Why not? I mean, the Chargers team is a team that can be beaten. Let's be honest; they are definitely a team that can be beaten. They've won games, but they've won games kind of like the Vikings have won games, even like last week against these Indianapolis Colts, where it's like they don't deserve to win that game because of what they put up. Now, kudos to them for coming back and being able to win that game. But the Chargers have been in similar situations where it's like, what are they doing? Okay, you know what? It worked out. They came out and they ended up winning the game. I guess it works out all in the end. But it's not games where you're like, why are they struggling with this team? I feel like I've asked myself that numerous times this year with the Chargers. So the Colts, Pittman, you got to roll out there. He's just too much of a weapon. Yes, he has had some disappointing weeks, but the Colts in general have just been disappointing at times. So I think you got to roll him out there, especially with the fact that Jonathan Taylor is going to be out. The Chargers should win this game, and they should win it comfortably. The 4.5 point spread should be easy for them to cover, in my opinion. But again, this could be one of those games where it's like, how did they only win it by 3? That being said, I'm not starting Foles. I'm not starting Paris Campbell, even though he could have a nice little game there. Zach Moss becomes the guy that I'm more comfortable starting, even though Deion Jackson could come in and be that dude. I think Zach Moss just offers more versatility to the Colts. He's the guy that I'd be more comfortable rolling out. He's projected for 9 points, and I could see him being right around 10 points, getting 2, 3 catches for 20, 30 yards and getting another like 60 yards rushing, maybe a little bit more. So nothing that's going to be phenomenal, but enough that he's able to, you're able to put him in as a flex and you're like, all right, I got 10 points out of him. It's all right. It could have been much worse. On the opposite side of the ball, Austin Eckler should have himself a day. This Colts defense can be shredded. Look at what the Vikings did to him. Look what just about every team has done to him. They are not a very good team this year. Austin Eckler should have himself a day. Herbert should be able to do just fine. The question is, can the Chargers really run out, drop a 30-point opening half on these Colts, and then just run the ball afterwards? So it may reduce a little bit of what Herbert does. Same thing with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, and Gerald Everett, but I think you're going to be just fine rolling them into your starting lineups. Herbert should be able to get a 250, 2 touchdown game, even just in the first half against a really weak Colts defense, which means you should be just fine with Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, Jared Everett, all in those plays there. All right. Bam, ladies and gentlemen, that does it. That is week 16. That is your semifinals. Please, please, please hit me up on Twitter if you have any questions at FF the At Home Dad. I'm always trying to respond. Yes, it is Christmas weekend. Yes, it is Christmas vacation. I'm going to try my best to go ahead and answer everything that's out there. But make sure you give me a follow on Twitter at FF the At Home Dad. Give the show a follow at The Fantasy Facts. Give Fantasy Data a follow at Fantasy Data NFL. Make sure you throw the NFL in there. Otherwise, you're going to get another thing in there. But make sure you come back for championship week. Hopefully, we were able to get you enough to progress onto the championship. I will be back next week. I should be playing in the championship in I'm thinking at least 3 or 4 leagues of the 5 that I have still going. So I hope to see you there. Ladies and gentlemen, happy holidays and happy new year, in case I don't see you. Until then, catch you on the flip side.